Hello and welcome to IGPP Expert Talks. I'm Heena Goswami, editorial consultant with IGPP, Institute for Governance, Policies and Politics, New Delhi. In our ongoing series about AI, today we are going to talk about a case that has been in much controversy, the Wikipedia versus ANI case. And to acquaint us with the complexities and the ramifications of the case, we are joined by Mr. Dhruv Garg, a practicing lawyer with interest in technology and law from the vantage point of policy and practice. Mr. Dhruv's focus has mainly been on artificial intelligence, Web3, online skill gaming, intermediary liability, and privacy. He is also the founder of IGAP, Indian Governance and Policy Project. Welcome to IGPP Expert Talk, sir.
Thank you, Ranjana, for inviting me, and thanks a lot for picking up this very relevant topic, especially given the context that it is going through right now.
Please start by giving our audience a little overview of the Wikipedia ANI case and why is it so contentious? What triggered the legal examination of Wikipedia's role in this context?
Sure. So, if you look at let's look at what Wikipedia is and what happened that ANI had to go to Delhi High Court and file a case against them, correct? So Wikipedia started in, I think, 2001 generally, correct? It claimed to be, and we'll get into the details further on the session, that Wikipedia when it started in 2001, the idea behind it by the founders was that, it will be a open source, publicly sourced encyclopedia, correct, where there is no central control by the publisher, correct, or by the founders themselves, correct. And over the year, what we saw is that certain community guidelines were created, certain community was created for contributing on this open source platform, correct. But as we know that anything on internet, correct, when you put anything as an open source, or when you put anything as a platform per se, correct, and there are multiple contributors that can go on it with relative ease, you can see a lot of trolling, vandalism, sometimes people contributing with oblique interest. On the other hand, sometimes those contributions may come from well-intended motives. Sometimes they might be wrong because for a certain period of time, no one noticed it, no one corrected it. So there can be multiple reasons why something on Wikipedia may go wrong, correct? What happened is that when, if you look at the ANI versus Wikipedia case right now, on the ANI wiki pages, as we call it, correct? So Wikipedia has multiple articles and they call some of them are called wiki pages. On the ANI wiki pages, they were on the top section of the wiki page for ANI. There were certain statements made or premises written on Wikipedia about ANI, where it said that there were certain allegations around against ANI, saying that they might be acting as a propaganda machine for the incumbent government at that moment. There were certain other news items that were marked on it, which was saying that they were not handling the news neutrally. So there were certain serious allegations made on ANI as a factual sort of assertion on the wiki pages. Now, the interesting part about it is that each of these assertions were cited. So if you see how Wikipedia works is that Wikipedia, at least its community guidelines and rules, says that it should be anything written on Wikipedia should come from a neutral point of view. Plus, anything that is written should be from a secondary source. So original content or a primary source content is not allowed on Wikipedia. So most of the things have to be cited or have to be sourced from some secondary. So these assertions, negative assertions about ANI were also cited, and source was given as some other credible platforms, correct? Or other news outlets per se. Now the debate is this. ANI says that Wikipedia, this is defamatory in nature. This is not true. Wikipedia is allowing all these things to be said on its platform. Since its ubiquitous presence and everyone is using it, it is defamatory to ANI, and they asked for 2 crore in composition. Later also they claim that it is not an intermediary, it is a publisher, and we'll get into that debate also later, and hence Wikipedia is liable. There were also request made in the court to sort of disclose the identity of the editors, correct, who made those edits, to which Wikipedia basically was late in complying in disclosing that identity. The question is still open. And for that, there were conversations in the court as to whether there should be a contempt sort of ruling held against them. And even Delhi High Court took the judge on the bench took certain strong objections to how there was another page created about the matter itself, Wikipedia versus ANI, correct, which now has been taken down by Wikipedia. So broadly, the issue was that ANI said that it's a defamatory content on Wikipedia, and the nature of Wikipedia is such that Wikipedia should be held liable. Whereas Wikipedia, obviously, when it goes to court, and it has gone to court earlier also in different jurisdictions, where it says that, no, I am an open source platform and I am an intermediary, and the safe harbor provision should apply to me. So that's a very brief and quick overview of the Wikipedia versus ANI matter.
So, Wikipedia has this model where it does not moderate or approve content, and it intervenes only when ordered by a court. How effective do you think that this model is, especially weighed against like now public demands of accountability? Also, now we have this rise of AI generated content, and this, users can struggle to differentiate between whether something is human created or AI generated. Do you think that this case also highlights the need for new forms of verification, especially as AI-driven content proliferates? Do you think there can be some measures that Wikipedia and other platforms, open source platforms, that they take to ensure credibility and transparency in this AI-saturated information landscape?
So the 2 or 3 parts of it, I'll try to take all of them one by one. Firstly, let's understand how Wikipedia operates, correct? And I know it's slightly more nuanced, and I'll try to sort of simplify it as much as it's possible. So Wikipedia is governed by certain pillars that it says so, and there are certain mechanisms in place. So first, it has a very lengthy, detailed community guidelines, correct? And there are rules that are built by the community itself, correct? So those guidelines form the bedrock of how Wikipedia should operate, ideally operate, correct? And as I said, few of the things like, it should be sourced, it should come from a neutral point of view. It should not be an original content. It should not be opinion of the editor itself, correct? And the other guidelines on how all this is governed. Then there's a governance structure within Wikipedia, correct? And in this governance structure, even you and I can, there are hundreds and thousands and millions of contributors. So, and their hierarchy within those contributors. Initially, you can make certain kinds of edit. Then once you have made that edit, you graduate to certain higher level of editor, etc. You get more control as you become a higher level of editor. You go to become an administrator, which has a lot more power, and then you become a bureaucrat, etc. So there's a hierarchy within it, but this hierarchy is not enforced by Wikipedia Foundation. So Wikipedia is sort of run by something called Wikimedia Foundation, correct? Which is a not-for-profit. Wikimedia Foundation does not per se control this hierarchy or these guidelines. It's community which has come up with a lot of sort of community decides who will be an administrator, who will be a bureaucrat, so the election process, etc. There's an arbitration committee also. There are a few other governance structure, but all this is based on volunteer editors, correct? Now, when you go up the hierarchy, you get more control, but you only get more control and higher hierarchy once you have contributed enough, and the community generally thinks that you are a credible person, correct? There are also mechanisms within Wikipedia where, let's say, if there's a particular edit made on Wikipedia is disputed, what happens is these different editors go on something called a wiki talk page, correct? On the talk page, the discussion happens as to whether this edit should go through or not. And the belief on which Wikipedia is founded is that there will be a consensus equilibrium reached ultimately on an open source, publicly sort of crowdsourced information where the ultimate truth, so to say, will come up. So this is the structure of Wikipedia, where Wikimedia Foundation does not exercise as much control. Rather, it's the community guidelines and community structures and hierarchy that decides this. In this structure, as the question that you have asked, correct? Broadly, a lot of people can say that it shows that Wikipedia Foundation per se, the platform per se, is more an intermediary, and everything is done through the public at large, where the Wikipedia doesn't exercise editorial control, correct? Editorial control is exercised by everyone, and hence it becomes an intermediary. Correct? Now, the question obviously arises, is this model something that should have more accountability? Right? And again, this is more of a philosophical question, because Wikipedia is one of those open source, crowdsourced platforms that has been relatively successful across the world, correct? If you go to research, if you look at 2008 Wikipedia versus today, the authenticity of it is much higher, correct? The credibility of the sources cited, the credibility of content on it is much higher. a lot of serious people in thousands of numbers are contributing to it. So Wikipedia has sort of now this cultural acceptance in our sort of society where people want to go and sort of treat it as the first stop for any information. So I do agree that while it is an intermediary, any platform of this nature should have certain higher level of accountability. Now an argument is made against it also that a higher level of accountability has already been achieved because of this consensus driven and talk page approach where multiple people can debate it together and come to a consensus based outcome. So definitely, considering the status of Wikipedia, there should be accountability. The question left to the court, and I will not go into giving my verdict about it, whether Wikipedia's internal guidelines and structures are serving that accountability or not. Most people say that looking at how credible at large Wikipedia is, and even the error rates are equivalent to maybe most times of a specifically curated encyclopedia, maybe the accountability structures are enough. Correct. However, what we have seen what has happened in the Telegram case. We have seen what's happened in WhatsApp cases. I think there is definitely a rising debate as to whether there should be higher level of accountability on such public platforms and open source platforms, considering how much influence they have. Correct. So that's on the accountability of it. Definitely a need. We can keep on debating whether that accountability is there or not. Wikipedia, relatively, I would say, has been very successful in making sure at least broadly and most of the content on it is verified, sourced well, edited well, and again, there are always disputes, fight, vandalism, etc. But that's some of the fringe cases. Coming to AI a bit, correct? Till now, when you talk about AI generated content, we haven't seen a lot of dispute on Wikipedia in relation to Wikipedia when it comes to AI generated content. An interesting hypothesis and an interesting hypothetical could be that tomorrow, what if, so I told you that there are editors who are volunteers. What if someone creates an AI editor for Wikipedia and creates multiple AI-based editors where they're not real human beings, but one person is controlling multiple editors and sort of submitting AI-generated content, which they can do much quicker than an individual, correct? The question is then, how does someone sort of manage that? Because you have to understand that Wikipedia works on a consensus level sort of model. So there will be a push and pull. So if someone floods Wikipedia, and again, people say that it's not that easy, with a lot of AI generated content, correct? Do you think that this push and pull will satisfy, because there'll be humans fighting against AI generated content, and maybe then this model may fail? We don't know yet. We haven't seen this happening on Wikipedia. We don't know how it might pan out on something like Wikipedia, but we have seen that it is a likely possibility to have. There will be scrupulous actors that will like to use AI edited or AI generated content to create fake editor profiles and try to push certain narratives on Wikipedia, correct? What can be done? Again, as we have there are multiple conversations that there is a need to figure out tech-based solutions backed by certain regulatory imperative to figure out what is an AI generated content, how can you sift through it, how can you filter through it, and maybe there should be transparency when this AI generated content happens, correct? So there are certain mechanisms that are in place, and we can go into depth if you love to, but definitely there is a worry that it will have an impact on open source platforms like Wikipedia in future.
Should Wikipedia be categorized as an intermediary or a publisher, even if it has a community who decides what should be published? And what would be the legal and operational ramifications of both the classifications?
So, for those who might be listening and who are not lawyers, I'll again try to sort of keep it very brief and simplified. So, if you look at the IT Act, correct, look at the definition for intermediary under 2W, and then we also read it along with section 79, correct, where safe harbor rests. The broad concept is that if an online platform is not generating its own content, is not deciding the receivers, correct, is not curating, and is only on behalf of someone else, is transmitting, storing, or hosting particular piece of information, data, etc., then it's an intermediary, correct? Now, if it passes these certain criteria, plus it takes certain due diligence measures that have been sort of introduced by the government through the rules, correct? The intermediary guidelines, where there are certain due diligence, like, you need to make sure that certain kind of content should not be published. The user should be aware about certain policies. There should be certain grievance redressal mechanism for social media and significant social media. There's certain other kind of higher due diligence measures. If you've taken care of all these things, then that platform, that intermediary is not going to be liable, correct? Until and unless it has actual knowledge of any unlawful act committed to that content, correct? And this actual knowledge, as per Shreya Singhal and other judgments, have been that it can't be constructive knowledge. They need to have this actual knowledge through a court order of a competent court or through a competent authority, correct? So it's not constructive knowledge. So that's the idea of an intermediary, and that has formed the bedrock of how communications is happening, how internet is developing across the world, and that's how social media, e-commerce platforms like Wikipedia are operating and are so successful. As opposed to this, there is what we call publishers, correct? Usually publishers are governed, if you look at news or media publishers, etc., mostly governed by Ministry of Information Broadcasting. Curated content is governed by the Part 3 of the intermediary guideline rules. In publisher, the idea is that the entity, the person or the entity has editorial control, is the originator of that source, and it has curated that content, correct? And then published it, supplied it, or broadcasted it. Where the entity itself has generated content, they take the liability on. So let's say if I publish a book which incites religious hatred or is inciting violence, then I am liable for it because I have written that book, correct? Whereas if I publish that book and host it on, let's say, a cloud service provider, the cloud service provider doesn't know what is being hosted. It's just hosting it on behalf of me without knowing it. It does not have actual knowledge. So they are not liable, correct? Only once the court says that this content should be removed and they don't remove it, then it becomes liable. Right? Now, in this context, if we look at Wikipedia, while I would say, and again, this is my personal opinion, the court can hold differently. Wikimedia Foundation, it has some 270 employees, does not, for most part, have an editorial control over the content, correct? In very few cases, when there is a court order, etc., do they make editorial changes. There are few instances where they have a grant system, etc., for Wikimedia education, because Wikipedia is not the only offering that they have, where there might be some involvement in terms of, content generation, etc. For most part of it, Wikipedia, the entity Wikimedia Foundation per se, does not have editorial control. It's the community and authors, etc., that are doing it. And the idea is that most of that is being published is also sourced by a secondary source, not a primary source. So usually those claims come from someone else, correct? Or some other secondary source where the liability can lie. Right? Does that mean that there is no vandalism or no oblique content that comes on Wikipedia? It does. We have seen it happening. However, most of the time, the editorial community itself changes it. And if sometimes court sort of goes and gives an order to Wikipedia, it will obviously revert it back. So for most parts, it looks on face of it that Wikipedia is an intermediary. However, it is not your classic intermediary like a social media platform where it's one-to-many communication, etc. It is acting as a community curated, cataloged encyclopedia, which acts as sort of, at least for a common person, as a repository of truth. And because of that, there are claims that Wikipedia is slightly more than an intermediary just by the nature of how people consume it. Is that a fair way of changing the nature of the intermediary status of Wikipedia? I don't know. I think we will have to leave it to the court because it's still sub judice. But I do think that there is value in treating Wikipedia as an intermediary. Correct? It has a social and a social utility that it serves, but because of it, because as you can't have such a huge community-driven, editorial sourced material, which is where editors and volunteers are not paid for. Correct? Does that mean that there should be higher checks and balances? Again, I don't know. It's a highly technical. We'll have to go through the whole community guideline, etc., and suggest maybe certain other changes. But at the moment, it seems that the platform and most of the platform is working really well. For the 1 or 2% of the issues that there are, we can debate as to there should be higher accountability on.
Do you think that imposing restrictions on Wikipedia would amount to curtailing freedom of speech because it is a community-led, community-driven platform? And even in the past, regarding the safe harbor protection that intermediaries have, government has warned platforms about losing their immunity if they fail to act on illegal content. How do you think this type of ultimatum would affect platforms like Wikipedia and their approach to moderation? And also, like, does it amount to, an attack on freedom of speech?
I won't say that this is an attack on freedom of speech. ANI as a news wire agency, etc., has the right to take legal recourse to, the legal rights and remedies that they have. Correct. I would say that from their viewpoint, they must believe that what they are doing is correct. Correct. Uh, can we talk about it in terms of chilling effect on freedom of speech? Definitely. Correct. So and why I'm rephrasing it is because I would never think that if someone is taking course to a competent court, a constitutional court, I will never term it as attack per se, because it's a habit of people generally to think that there is ill intent on everyone's side. Correct. So I will not go into that. I would say yes. The way I'll want to answer it is whether there can be chilling effect around these kind of issues. I would definitely think that they can be chilling effect. One of the core issues that I'm very interested in the matter is that whether Wikipedia is going to release the identity of the editors that made those impugned edits. Correct? That's a very relevant question. Now, this is where the chilling effect can come in. For example, if Wikipedia is forced to, reveal these editors' identity, and then ANI or someone else goes after them, correct, for liability purposes, then what is going to happen? These most likely, and I have no idea who these guys are, but these editors will be individuals, correct? And if the liability is put on them, then it is most likely that other editors, when they figure out, oh, it's easy to get our identity revealed, correct, and people can come after us, and there can be crores of rupees that are claimed against us, it might have a chilling effect on those thousands of volunteers, millions of volunteers that are contributing on Wikipedia. So there can be definitely a chilling effect in curbing speech per se, from which public speech per se, where this content is being sourced. So yes, there is a real fear of chilling effect on the huge community that Wikipedia is run on. The question is, it is most likely, because I'm a lawyer and not just a public policy professional, so I have to say that the burden falls on the court to decide how to balance a defamatory suit and the rights that an organization like ANI has to not have its reputation besmirched, if actually that was done. Correct? You have to, firstly, ANI has to prove that it actually lost reputation because of false statement. Some people might say it is sourced, well sourced, it came from public, other media outlets, etc. So it's not false. Leaving that aside, the court will have to balance the rights of ANI with the chilling effect that this going after the editor's identity, etc., will have on communication, etc. But for this, I think a much higher sort of analysis has to take place. It can't be just ANI versus that allegation. Correct? It has to be taken in, how do we want to see our internet grow? Correct? How do we see our internet be when we are discussing these issues? As you said, correct? If there are orders by government, etc., will that change? I think, first of all, any platform that is running in India, digital or otherwise, has to follow the law of the land. Correct? So there can't be that a platform is scared by the law of the land. If they're scared of the law of the land, they should not operate in India. The second question is, when we are talking about law of the land, we should ensure, for lawyers, public policy professionals, people who are in court, judges, etc., that our law in the land should, follow the spirit that it is supposed to be. Right? Freedom of speech is a very high constitutional fundamental right. It should follow that ideal. There's certain reasonable restriction given there, and these reasonable restrictions should only be the grounds on which speech is sort of curtailed. And we need to, when we are curtailing that speech, that chilling effect is taken into also place as a matter of public policy and not just of law. So I think that will be a balancing act that we should leave to the court at the moment. But my view is that it definitely has a chilling effect, and we should be very mindful while talking about these issues, that these chilling effects should not curtail the very nature of the internet, which is benefiting all of us.
I think law also needs to evolve with time, right? And you mentioned Section 79 of IT Act, which provides immunity to platforms for user-posted content. Do you think that this provision still aligns with today's digital landscape and the rise of information technologies? And also, mind you, that now platforms have bots. They are taking money from different sources to sort of push narratives at times. We have seen that during election. So should that, that immunity continue with the changing landscape?
So again, I think it's a very relevant question, and especially if I mean, obviously a few months back we were having conversations around a Digital India Act, correct? And while during the consultation of those Digital India Act, the relevant ministries and officials had made sort of certain statements which talked about, do we need to revisit safe harbor provisions, correct? Should we look at intermediary liability in a different light, especially looking at how the nature of it has changed, correct? And there is no doubt the influence that intermediaries per se and platforms per se that has on our life, whether it's social media intermediaries, whether it's things like Wikipedia, whether it's like things like Telegram, etc. There are enough controversies that keep on cropping on, in relation to these issues, correct? I would say my personal belief is that the internet, and again, I'm bringing it's on a slightly higher pedestal, that internet, the way it has been designed, was supposed to be free, correct? I would have ideally wanted a world where there is no restriction on the internet and people themselves or the world at large and society itself governs and is courteous enough on the internet to operate in a way where it only benefits people and there is no harm. But as we know, anything which is open to all will always be used to sort of for oblique purposes or intent, and hence intermediary guideline came for that. So it allowed platforms to grow, innovate, while making sure that there are certain due diligence measures in place. There is also provision of removing content, etc., on orders, etc. So those checks and balances were in place and are still in place. So I would say that while these checks and balances are in place, I think that is a good system to have in terms of safe harbor provisions. They should be safe harbor. I agreed that because of the vastness of the impact of it, the harm may be growing, at least in public perception, and the society at large might be facing a little more harm compared to, let's say, 20 years back when this concept was envisaged. Does that mean that we should do away with safe harbor provisions? Should we do away with, intermediary liability the way we look at it? I don't think so. I think we should retain a safe harbor provision. But yes, in certain issues which you brought up, correct? What if a platform is getting paid to push a certain narrative, correct? What if internal politics of the platform is impacting what is being sort of, produced on the whole content is moderated on that platform, because platform themselves moderate content, they themselves make guidelines. I think that definitely can be looked at, correct? We should look at it, what are the processes and guidelines that the platform is using, and what kind of control it is exercising on neutral content. And we need to, while keeping safe harbor in place, we can definitely have a discussion or more discussion on how content moderation takes place on platforms and whether platforms are doing enough, and are there checks and balances within the platforms as to ensure that neutrality is maintained, political neutrality or other kinds of neutrality is maintained, and personal bias does not creep up when content moderation happens. I think that kind of conversation definitely needs to take place, is taking place, and I'm assuming that this push and pull will definitely result in a system, correct? Again, internet started much early on. In 2000, we had an act. 24 years later, we think that act might not be as great as it used to be. We need a change. I think this push and pull will lead to a system where there'll be a hybrid. The safe harbor provision will be there. There might be certain other, due diligence measures or obligations on the platform to ensure that there's no biasness in their content moderation sort of practices. I think there's a need for that, definitely. Safe harbor, I don't think so. We should touch it till the time we are very, very sure that any other model works, right? Because that impacts on the very foundation of how internet works today.
Or like, what should happen when a CEO of a social media platform decides that they are in favor of a certain political ideology or candidate, and the AI bot that it has to provide information, like Grok on Twitter, in name of satire, like sometimes when it's providing misinformation. I think that now has become a new angle to the whole debate on social media and the liabilities that they.
I mean, so without taking any names, what I will say is, like, let's say if a CEO or a founder of a particular social media platform, which is very famous, has his or her own political views, correct? I don't think so. Irrespective, again, I'm not going to whether they're correct or not. I'm definitely, so anything I say is not based on their political view, correct? What I'm trying to say is that those CEOs and founders can definitely have political views and they can air it on their platform as well, correct? Till the time they're doing it as a common user, correct? What we need to ensure is whether that CEO or founder is using their own platform as a common user or not, correct? or is using broadly as a user or user category that is available to others as well. Correct? If that founder or CEO, him or her, are treated as any other user, neutrally without bias, I think there is no problem in them voicing their opinions. Just because they're popular, we can't sort of penalize them on their own platform. However, if we find that founder or CEO, etc., is using their influence over that platform to maybe boost their own opinion more, is using it to unduly influence by rigging their backends, or influence the platform on that backend tech side, and they're forcing their employees to do certain things, which sort of causes their opinion to be shown more and maybe their opponent's opinion to be shown less. That's something that is wrong. Correct? That's where I think that if we talk about safe harbor, I think it loses safe harbor. Correct? Because then that's you're trying to figure out who your intended receiver is. You're exercising editorial control, etc. So we have to divide it into two. If it is they are using it as a normal common user just because they're popular and is being heard more, I don't think that's a problem. But if they are manipulating the backend of their platform, that's a problem. Correct? So there is a high burden on us also that if we want to say that this is wrong, we need to prove it. Correct? In a competent court of law. Otherwise, they're free to do whatever they want. Will these things have more impact in future going forward on elections and democracy? Definitely will. Correct? But so did newspapers and radio had. Correct? And where a few editors had more control over what information the people were consuming. Now anyone can create that information and communicate, and obviously it will have certain impact. And we have seen these platforms being. We had the Cambridge Analytica issue. We know that there can be misinformation and disinformation campaigns being run by state actors itself. So there are a lot of issues. Correct? It's not that this is all hunky-dory. But that was being done earlier also. It's just that we need to find solutions to it. And we have to figure out, without throwing the baby with the bathwater, we need to figure out, okay, where the issue persists and can law step in to answer that. Right? So again, that's my idea. Let's not think it's wrong for a founder to do it. But if we find any back-end manipulation, definitely blame them.
What broader significance does this case hold, not only for Wikipedia, but for other platforms and their users? And how might the outcome impact digital spaces and information sharing norms in India?
I think what this court case is going to do, firstly, I think this court case will definitely go into the intermediary versus publisher debate. Correct? It will most likely elucidate and enunciate a lot more on an intermediary liability and how safe harbor is being used. From Anish Bajaj to Shreya single cases in 2015, etc., and then 2017, few other cases came, which kept on saying. I am assuming that this court will only add to that jurisprudence that is established. Correct? The interesting thing will be how does this matter treats the editors. Correct? What will be the impact on the editors? That will be a more sort of an interesting question for me, because what's going to happen is that it's going to ensure how, or at least sort of underline how privacy will be treated on intermediary platforms. Correct? How, when someone says that my platform is private, how private is it? Correct? What kind of checks court will sort of put in place? Whether the court will say, oh, you can only subvert someone's privacy if there is a court order and tell us what their identity is, or does there need to be any other kind of mechanism, etc. Correct? So I think the impact it will have is A, on how we read intermediary liability in India. B, how does privacy is treated for contributors or communicators on an intermediary platform. Correct? And in what cases that can be breached. We will also see whether open source work or not, because let's assume this is Wikipedia is an open source platform, correct? We have open source AI systems models as well. We have a lot of open source different kind of platforms. The open source nature of these platforms will also get impacted by these this judgment, correct? So in addition to intermediary liability, privacy of contributors and users, the open source nature of it, I think these 3-4 aspects will be severely impacted, positively or negatively. We'll have to see. As a conclusion of it. Again, as we have already discussed, correct? We have Telegram, we have WhatsApp. There are multiple push and pull by the government, by the society, and this platform as to whether we want to operate in India or not. Correct? We definitely don't want a case where we go the China way, where everything is banned, correct? But we definitely don't want a case where the law of the land is not followed, correct? So I think we have to see how the judgment balances these different interests and push and pull in terms of the already created jurisprudence for last 15-20 years.
Thank you so much.